the city streets were bustling with the morning rush. Executives in pristine suits hurried to their offices, mothers pushed strollers along the sidewalks, and young people with backpacks slung over their shoulders rushed to catch the next bus. Amid this crowd, no one noticed Daniel Harris, a man in his early 40s, standing beside a worn-out shopping cart. He was there, but it was as if he weren't. Daniel wore a shabby brown coat, patched in various places, and sneakers so old their soles were separating. He looked tired, not just from the weight of the cart he pushed around the city but from the weight of the life he carried. Atop the cart, amidst crushed cans and scrap pieces, lay a small treasure, a notebook bound with duct tape, its edges worn and yellowed. It was in this notebook that Daniel poured his dreams. Daniel hadn't always lived this way. There was a time when he had a home, a family, and a job. He was a skilled mechanic and electronics technician, and his talent for fixing and creating devices was remarkable. In his heyday, he loved spending hours in the workshop, dismantling and assembling machines, inventing solutions to problems no one else had noticed yet. But life, as he often said, has a funny way of taking everything away from you. First came the closure of the factory where he worked, a casualty of the economic crisis. Jobless, he tried to survive by doing odd repair jobs, but demand dwindled. Then his wife, worn out by the financial instability, decided to leave, taking their young son with her. He never blamed them, but the loss devastated him. Over time, the bills piled up, the house was sold, and Daniel found himself on the streets. Now, the street was his workshop. Daniel collected scrap, searched for useful parts, and turned trash into something functional. He spent his days walking the city, rummaging through trash cans and abandoned lots. That morning, he found a broken fan in a narrow alley. He examined it carefully, spinning the damaged blades with his fingers. "This'll do," he muttered to himself, placing the fan in his cart. Nearby, a group of workers was unloading goods from a truck. One of them glanced at Daniel with disdain, but he didn't care. He was used to those looks. With his cart fuller, Daniel made his way to a nearby park where he often worked. He sat on a wooden bench, pulled the notebook from the bottom of the cart, and began sketching. The drawing was of a portable device that combined a fan with an air filtration system. "Efficient filter, low energy consumption," he wrote beside the sketch. "Portable. Easy to carry." The notebook was full of ideas like this. Daniel had always been a dreamer. He believed that, even in the worst circumstances, it was possible to create something that made a difference. It was what kept him going, day after day. As he drew, memories of the past came rushing back. He remembered the day he received his first toolkit, a birthday gift from his father. "Never underestimate the power of your hands, son," old Harris had said. "They can build things that change the world." Daniel smiled at the memory, but the smile soon faded. It was hard to believe that those hands, which once built so much, now only carried the burden of a scrap cart. A group of children ran through the park, laughing and playing. A girl stopped for a moment to look at Daniel's drawings. "Are you an inventor?" she asked, curious. Daniel smiled gently. "Something like that." The girl ran off to catch up with her friends, and Daniel returned to his work, refining the details of the sketch. He knew no one would take his inventions seriously, not while he lived on the streets. But that didn't stop him from dreaming. Later, as he pushed his cart toward a bridge where he often slept, Daniel heard laughter coming from a group of teenagers. They pointed at him and started mocking. "Hey, Einstein! What are you going to invent today?" "A time machine to go back to being somebody," one of them shouted. Daniel didn't respond. He'd heard worse. He kept walking until he reached his workshop, a corner under the bridge with a few cardboard boxes and an old blanket. There, he organized the parts he'd collected during the day and began dismantling the fan. His calloused hands worked precisely, disconnecting wires and screws with a small screwdriver he always carried. As he worked, he remembered a phrase his father used to say, "You only truly lose when you give up." Daniel repeated those words to himself like a mantra as he set the fan blades aside and examined the motor. He didn't know how or when, but he believed that one day, the ideas in his notebook could make a difference. Before sleeping, Daniel opened the notebook once more and reread his notes. One of them, written years ago, caught his attention: "Never give up, even when no one believes in you." He knew these words were more than a reminder. They were a promise he'd made to himself. Lying under the bridge, with the cold wind cutting through the silence of the night, Daniel closed his eyes, trying to ignore the ache in his bones and the emptiness in his stomach. Tomorrow would be just another day of struggle, or so he thought. Because at that moment, somewhere in the city, fate was already moving to change his life forever. It was another cloudy morning, with the cold wind rustling the branches of the trees. Daniel Harris pushed his shopping cart along the sidewalk, his steps slow and careful. He had just finished dismantling a fan and some scrap parts, neatly organizing everything in the cart for potential new projects. His mind was elsewhere, lost among the sketches in his notebook and the memories of his past. A few blocks away, a black Tesla Model South glided along the avenue. Behind the wheel was Elon Musk, one of the most recognized men in the world, though at that moment he was just another frustrated driver. The car's dashboard displayed warning lights, and a strange noise was coming from the electric motor. "Damn it," Musk muttered, pulling the car over to the curb. He looked around. The neighborhood seemed modest, and there were few people nearby. He tried calling for support but realized it would take a while for assistance to arrive. Daniel, who was only a few meters away, heard the sound of the failing motor and glanced toward the Tesla. The car caught his attention. He had always been fascinated by advanced technology, and here was one of the most sophisticated vehicles in the world. Curious, he pushed his cart toward the vehicle. As he approached, he saw Musk standing next to the car, inspecting the open motor. It was a strange moment. The billionaire was there, seemingly alone, like any other person with car troubles. Daniel hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Excuse me," he said, trying not to sound intrusive. "Looks like you've got a problem." Musk looked up, quickly assessing the man in front of him. With his shabby clothes and scrap-filled cart, Daniel didn't seem like someone who could help. "Yeah, it's the motor. I'm waiting for help, but it might take a while." Daniel offered a small smile. "Mind if I take a look? I used to work on motors, a while back." Musk raised an eyebrow but, curious, stepped aside to let Daniel approach. "Go ahead." Daniel placed his cart to the side and opened his old backpack, pulling out an improvised set of tools. He examined the motor with care, as though it was something he did every day. "This is an impressive model," he remarked. "Permanent magnet synchronous motor, right?" Musk was surprised by the man's knowledge. "Yes, exactly. You know about these?" "A bit," Daniel replied modestly. "I used to fix things before." He let the sentence trail off, focusing on the motor. After a few minutes of adjusting connections and inspecting components, Daniel found the issue. "It's a loose connection here," he explained, pointing to a connector. "Probably caused by vibrations. I need something to tighten this. Hang on." He grabbed a rusty screwdriver and began working. Musk watched in silence, intrigued by the precision and confidence with which Daniel handled the motor. In less than 10 minutes, the car was running smoothly again. "All set," Daniel said, stepping back. "It should work now." Musk got into the car, started it, and heard the motor purr softly. He looked at Daniel, impressed. "You fixed it in minutes. How did you know what to do?" Daniel shrugged. "Just experience. I like to take things apart, figure out how they work. I guess it's a hard habit to break." Intrigued, Musk stepped out of the car and looked more closely at Daniel's cart, noticing the taped-up notebook. "What's that?" he asked, pointing. "Oh, just some sketches," Daniel said, slightly embarrassed. "Ideas for inventions. Nothing special." "Can I take a look?" Musk asked, holding out his hand. Daniel hesitated. That notebook was his most prized possession, but something about Musk's genuine curiosity convinced him to hand it over. Musk opened the notebook and began flipping through the pages, seeing detailed drawings of devices and meticulous notes. "This is impressive," Musk finally said. "You drew all this yourself?" Daniel nodded, unsure how to respond. "They're just ideas. Things I've thought of while wandering around." Musk closed the notebook and looked directly at Daniel. "You know, ideas like these can change the world, but only if someone gives them a chance." Daniel chuckled nervously. "I don't know if anyone would give someone like me a chance." "I would," Musk replied without hesitation. "How about coming with me? I want to show this to some people." Daniel blinked, stunned. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. Your talent is real, and you deserve a chance to show it." Musk smiled. "Besides, you just saved my car. The least I can do is repay the favor." As the two talked, a group of onlookers started watching from a distance. Daniel felt the weight of their gazes and lowered his head. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, and the idea of stepping into Musk's world made him nervous. "Look, I appreciate it," he began, hesitantly. "But I'm not sure I'm the kind of person you're looking for." "You're exactly the kind of person I'm looking for," Musk said firmly. "Come on. If it doesn't work out, at least you tried." Daniel looked at his cart, at the notebook, and finally at Musk. Something about the offer seemed impossible, but at the same time, irresistible. He took a deep breath and answered, "Okay. Let's give it a shot." The bustling streets of the city were replaced by the vast, modern industrial complex of Tesla. Daniel Harris looked around, clutching his notebook as if it were a shield. The environment was overwhelming. People moved quickly, carrying tablets, laptops, and technological devices he had never seen before. Glass walls reflected the sunlight, and Tesla's logo shone brightly atop the building. Elon Musk walked ahead, perfectly at ease. He made light comments as they headed toward the conference room. "Don't worry, Daniel. You'll do fine. Just be honest. These people care about results, and you have ideas that can lead to them." Daniel nodded, but the knot in his stomach didn't loosen. He knew Musk believed in him, but the thought of being surrounded by engineers and high-level executives intimidated him. They entered the conference room, where about a dozen people were already waiting. Everyone stood when Musk walked in but quickly turned their attention to Daniel, assessing him with curious and skeptical looks. His simple clothes and calloused hands contrasted sharply with the sophisticated environment. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Daniel Harris," Musk began with a smile. "He has some interesting ideas I believe are worth exploring. I hope you'll keep an open mind." A younger engineer in the corner crossed his arms. "What's his background?" he asked bluntly, his tone unmasked in skepticism. Daniel hesitated, but Musk stepped in before he could answer. "He has a background in the real world," Musk said, staring the man down. "And that's often more valuable than any degree." The heavy silence that followed gave Daniel a moment to open his notebook. He quickly flipped to the page with the sketch of the airmate and placed it on the table, turning it so everyone could see. "This is one of my projects," Daniel began, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's a portable device that purifies air and monitors environmental quality in real time. It could be useful in polluted cities, hospitals, public transport, basically, anywhere clean air is a challenge." The engineers leaned forward, analyzing the details. At first, the murmurs were skeptical. "This seems too complex for such a small device," a woman said, pointing at the drawing. "How do you plan to integrate all these functions?" Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but Musk gestured for him to take his time. Breathing deeply, he began explaining the components he had envisioned and how they could work together. He admitted that some parts of the design were theoretical but showed that he had thought of practical solutions. As he spoke, the expressions of the attendees began to shift. The doubtful whispers turned into murmurs of interest. The engineer who had asked the question earlier gave a slight smile. "This has potential," she admitted. Not everyone was convinced. An older executive seated at the head of the table tapped his fingers lightly on the glass surface. Mr. Harris, he began, his tone mildly condescending, this is interesting, but without prototypes or testing, these are just ideas on paper. How can we be sure it's worth investing resources in this project? Daniel felt his face flush. He knew this question was coming, but it still stung. He looked at Musk, who encouraged him with a nod. Taking a deep breath, Daniel replied. I know I'm just a guy with a notebook, he said, his voice steadier than he expected. But every one of these ideas was created with real problems in mind. I've lived on the streets for years. I've seen what people go through, how pollution affects health, and how simple solutions can make a huge difference. This device might seem small, but it has the potential to change lives. The room fell silent. The executive crossed his arms but said nothing more. Musk seized the moment. Innovation comes from unexpected places, he said. Daniel has something we all need, an extraordinary vision. That's why I believe in him. In the weeks that followed, Daniel was integrated into a small team of engineers to start developing the AirMate prototype. Despite Musk's initial support, the process was far from easy. Many of the engineers, accustomed to working with cutting-edge technology, struggled to take Daniel seriously. Some made sarcastic comments about his ideas, while others outright ignored his suggestions. Daniel worked long hours, often staying late in the lab to refine the details of the project. He felt the pressure of having to prove himself but didn't let it discourage him. His notebook remained his anchor, and he frequently added new ideas or refined old ones. One night, while reviewing the prototype's calculations, Daniel received a message from Musk, I'm proud of what you're doing. Keep it up. Great things are coming. The encouragement was exactly what Daniel needed. He knew the path ahead would be difficult, but he was determined to make the AirMate work. For the first time in years, he felt he was on the right track. Daniel Harris woke up early now, not to the sound of rushing traffic or the chill of the pavement, but to the simplicity of a small apartment he had managed to rent. The bed was basic, the space modest, but to him, it was a castle. In the kitchen, a kettle whistled as Daniel prepared his coffee, gazing out the window at the city that had once been his greatest adversary. That day, he dressed in a clean shirt and a new pair of pants he had bought with his first earnings. The AirMate had been launched weeks earlier and was already making a significant impact in the market. Sales had soared, and people were sharing stories of how the device was improving their lives. Daniel had unexpectedly become a known name, not on a celebrity level, but enough for his story of perseverance to start circulating in blogs and local publications. At the Tesla lab, Daniel had become a respected figure. He had earned the trust of the team and, more importantly, their friendship. Lucy greeted him with a smile as he walked in. Look who's becoming a star, she teased, handing him a tablet with an article. Check this out, From Homelessness to Air Innovation, the inspiration of Daniel Harris. Daniel chuckled and shook his head. Still getting used to this. Feels surreal. Raj, who was working on an updated AirMate prototype, joined the conversation. You deserve it, man. Seriously. Just don't let it go to your head. No chance of that, Daniel replied. I still have so much to learn. Later that day, Daniel was invited to a small community event. Musk had encouraged him to attend, saying it was a great opportunity to share his story and inspire others. Nervous but excited, Daniel stepped onto the makeshift stage, where a crowd of young entrepreneurs and local residents awaited him. My story isn't about luck, he began, holding the microphone firmly. It's about persistence, even when everything seems lost. If there's one thing I want to leave you with today, it's this. Never underestimate the power of believing in yourself, even when no one else does. The audience erupted in applause. Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced in years, pride. Meanwhile, Daniel's story was beginning to reach unexpected places. A young man sitting in a small apartment miles away watched a video where Daniel explained how the AirMate worked. The man stared at the screen, his heart racing. It can't be, he whispered, squinting to be sure. The man in the video was his father. He hadn't seen Daniel since he was a child when his mother had decided to cut all ties. Back then, he didn't understand why, but now, as an adult, he began to see that his mother's decisions might have been rooted in pride and unresolved pain. The young man, whose name was Liam, felt a whirlwind of emotions. For years, he had harbored curiosity and resentment toward the man he believed had abandoned him. But now, seeing Daniel in such a different light, he felt something new, hope. That evening, Daniel returned to his apartment, exhausted but content. He heated a bowl of soup in the microwave and sat on the couch, flipping through his notebook. Although the airmate was a success, his mind was already full of new ideas. But before he could dive back into his sketches, a knock at the door interrupted him. He frowned, not expecting anyone. When he opened the door, he found a young man with messy brown hair and intense eyes that looked strikingly familiar. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "Can I help you?" he asked, confused. "You're Daniel Harris, right?" the young man asked, his voice trembling slightly. "I am," Daniel replied, even more puzzled. "Who are you?" The young man took a deep breath before answering. "My name is Liam. I think I'm your son." Daniel's world seemed to stop. He stood in silence, his mind racing as he tried to process what he had just heard. Finally, he stepped back, gesturing for Liam to come in. "Come in," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. Liam entered, glancing around nervously, just as uncertain as Daniel. The silence between them was heavy but full of possibilities. I don't know what to say," Daniel began, sitting on the couch. "I never thought I'd see you again." "I thought the same," Liam said, sitting in a nearby chair. "But when I saw your story, I knew I had to try." "And your mother?" Daniel asked, hesitant. "She doesn't know I'm here," Liam admitted. "She always told me you were a failure, that you weren't worth it. But I never fully believed her. And now, I think I was right." The two began to talk, sharing stories and trying to fill the years of separation. Liam explained how he had always been curious about his father and how his life had been shaped by Daniel's absence. Daniel, in turn, shared how he had ended up on the streets but had never stopped thinking about his son. Their conversation stretched late into the night, and though it didn't resolve everything, it was a start. When Liam finally stood to leave, Daniel hugged him tightly, as if afraid his son might disappear again. "Thank you for finding me," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "It means more than you can imagine." Liam smiled. "I think we have a lot to catch up on. But I want to try." Daniel Harris woke up early now, no longer to the sound of hurried traffic or the cold of the pavement, but in the quiet comfort of a small apartment he could finally call home. The bed was simple, the space modest, but for him, it was a palace. He prepared coffee in a small kitchen, letting the kettle whistle while he gazed out the window at the city that had once seemed so merciless. That morning, he donned a clean shirt and slacks, new clothes he'd purchased with his first paycheck. The airmate had launched weeks earlier and was already making waves in the market. Sales were booming, and stories poured in about how the device was making a tangible difference in people's lives. Daniel's name was slowly becoming known, not in a celebrity sense, but enough for his tale of resilience to circulate across blogs and local media. At the lab, Daniel had earned respect. His peers valued his input, and friendships had blossomed. Lucy greeted him warmly as he entered. "Look who's becoming a star," she teased, handing him a tablet displaying an article. "Check this out, From the Streets to Air Purification, the Daniel Harris Journey." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm still getting used to this. Feels unreal." Raj, who was tinkering with a new airmate prototype, chimed in. "You've earned it, man. Just don't let it go to your head." "That won't be a problem," Daniel replied. "I've still got so much to learn." Later that day, Daniel was invited to a community event. Musk had encouraged him to attend, saying it was a great opportunity to share his story and inspire others. Nervous yet excited, Daniel climbed onto the small stage, where a mix of young entrepreneurs and local residents awaited. "My story isn't about luck," he began, gripping the microphone firmly. It's about persistence, believing in yourself when all seems lost. If there's one thing I want to leave with you today, it's this: don't underestimate the power of hope, even if no one else believes in you. The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt a swell of pride. While Daniel was speaking, his story was reaching far-off places. In a modest apartment miles away, a young man watched a video where Daniel explained the airmaid's workings. The man stared at the screen, his heart pounding. "It's him," the young man whispered, his voice barely audible. The man in the video was his father, Daniel Harris. It had been years since he'd seen him. His mother had severed all contact when he was still a boy. Back then, he hadn't understood why. But as an adult, he now realized her decisions had likely been fueled by pride and lingering resentment. The young man, Liam, felt a rush of emotions: curiosity, sorrow, and a spark of hope. For years, he had nursed a mix of anger and questions about the man who had seemed to vanish from his life. Now, seeing Daniel thriving, he felt compelled to seek him out. That evening, Daniel returned home to his apartment, exhausted but satisfied. He reheated a bowl of soup in the microwave and settled on the couch, his trusty notebook open on his lap. Although the airmaid had proven a success, his mind buzzed with new ideas. But before he could dive into his sketches, a knock on the door interrupted him. He frowned. Visitors were rare. He opened the door to find a young man with unkempt brown hair and strikingly familiar eyes staring back at him. Daniel's breath caught. "Can I help you?" Daniel asked, his voice uncertain. "You're Daniel Harris, right?" the young man asked, his voice trembling slightly. "I am," Daniel replied, more confused than ever. "Who are you?" The young man took a deep breath before speaking. "My name is Liam. I think I'm your son." Time seemed to stop. Daniel stared, his mind reeling, before stepping back and gesturing for Liam to come in. "Please, come in," Daniel said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Liam stepped into the apartment, looking around nervously as Daniel closed the door behind him. The silence between them was thick, yet laden with unspoken possibilities. I don't know what to say," Daniel began, sitting on the couch. "I thought I'd never see you again." "I thought the same," Liam admitted, sitting in a chair across from him. "But when I saw your story, I had to try." "What about your mother?" Daniel asked hesitantly. "She doesn't know I'm here," Liam confessed. "She always told me you were a failure, someone not worth knowing. But I never completely believed her. And now I know I was right." Slowly, the two began talking, recounting their lives and attempting to bridge the years of separation. Liam shared how he had always wondered about his father, while Daniel explained the series of events that had left him homeless. He emphasized how he had never stopped thinking about his son. Their conversation stretched long into the night. Though it didn't resolve everything, it was a start. As Liam finally rose to leave, Daniel hugged him tightly, tears welling in his eyes. "Thank you for finding me," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "It means more than you could ever imagine." Liam smiled faintly. "I think we have a lot of catching up to do. But I want to try." Daniel Harris could never have imagined that the greatest change in his life would not be professional success, but reconnecting with someone he thought he would never see again, his son, Liam. After their initial meeting, Daniel's world felt fuller with possibilities but also more complicated. He wanted to make up for lost time, but he knew it wouldn't be easy to overcome years of separation. The next morning, Daniel sat with a cup of coffee in hand, flipping through his notebook as he did every morning. This time, however, he wasn't reviewing invention ideas but jotting down small phrases, trying to organize his thoughts about his reunion with Liam. Meanwhile, Liam was also processing everything. Sitting in his apartment, he stared at an old photo from his childhood, one where he stood next to his mother. He's nothing like she said, Liam thought. Daniel wasn't the irresponsible man his mother had painted. He was someone who had faced unimaginable adversity and found a way to overcome it. Liam decided he wanted to get to know his father better, even if it meant confronting the complicated memories of his childhood. At the lab, Daniel arrived early as usual. He was adjusting components for a new project when he heard a familiar voice. Turning, he saw Liam standing in the entrance, holding a bag. "I brought coffee and donuts," Liam said with a shy smile. "Thought you might like them." Daniel laughed. "You're definitely my son. I've always had a weakness for donuts." They sat together, and for the first time, Liam began asking questions about Daniel's life before everything fell apart. "Why did you stop fighting for custody?" Liam asked bluntly. Daniel hesitated, setting his coffee down. "I didn't want to stop," he said, his voice heavy. "But I didn't have the resources or even a stable place for you to live. At the time, it seemed like the best thing I could do was not drag you into the mess my life had become." Liam nodded slowly, absorbing the response. "She always said you gave up on us." Daniel looked directly at his son, his eyes glistening with emotion. "I never gave up on you, Liam. Never." Their conversation flowed naturally from there, as if they were finally ready to break the barriers that had kept them apart for so long. Liam began spending more time with Daniel, visiting the lab regularly. Lucy and Raj welcomed him warmly, and Liam started helping with small tasks, gradually immersing himself in the world of technology that fascinated his father. One night, while they worked together in the lab, Liam asked, "Dad, how did you stay strong for so long? I mean, living on the streets, it must have been horrible." Daniel glanced at the notebook on the table. "This notebook was my anchor," he said. "When I hit rock bottom, it was the only thing that reminded me of who I was before everything fell apart. Each drawing, each idea, it was like telling myself there was still something worthwhile in me." Liam carefully picked up the notebook, flipping through its pages. "And now? Do you still need it?" Daniel smiled. "Not as much as I used to. Now I have you." As their relationship deepened, Daniel realized he wanted to use his newfound position to help others in similar situations. Inspired by his reunion with Liam, he decided to create a program to offer opportunities to people who, like him, had talent but lacked resources or support. He shared the idea with Musk, who was immediately enthusiastic. "That's brilliant, Daniel," Musk said. "You have a story that can truly inspire others. Let's make this happen." Together, they began planning workshops where people experiencing homelessness could learn practical and technological skills. Daniel wanted the program to be more than just training. He wanted to create a space where individuals could regain confidence in themselves, just as he had. At the opening of the first workshop, Daniel was visibly nervous. He wasn't used to public speaking, but he knew this was an opportunity to share his story and motivate others. Liam was in the audience, watching proudly. "For years," Daniel began, holding the microphone, "I thought my life had no purpose. I lost my family, my home, my dignity, but the worst part was losing hope. This notebook was the only thing that kept me going. And even then, there were days when I doubted it mattered." He paused, looking at the audience. "This project is my way of giving back, of showing that it's never too late to start over." The audience gave him a standing ovation, but what touched Daniel most was the smile on Liam's face. He realized that while he was helping others, he was also building something important for his son. That night, Daniel and Liam had dinner together at home. It was a simple meal, but it held profound meaning. They laughed, shared stories, and started planning for the future. Daniel spoke about expanding the workshops, while Liam expressed his desire to get more involved in the project. "I want to be part of this, Dad," Liam said. "I want to help you give others the chance you never had." Daniel's eyes welled with tears, but he smiled. "Nothing would make me happier." The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The closing event of the first year of Daniel's workshops was being held outdoors, with simple tables and warm string lights creating an inviting atmosphere. Participants, volunteers, and new friends gathered to celebrate the program's success, which had already changed dozens of lives. Daniel was at the center of it all, shaking hands and receiving hugs from people who had benefited from the workshops. He wore a simple suit, but the glow in his eyes revealed he felt more at home in his new life than ever before. In a quieter corner, under a softly illuminated tree decorated with small lights, stood Elon Musk. Daniel noticed the familiar figure and approached him. "Elon," Daniel greeted with a warm smile. "I didn't expect you to make it. I know your schedule is packed." Musk shrugged, holding a glass of water. "I wouldn't miss this for anything, Daniel. This event isn't just about you. It's about what you've done to change lives. I wanted to see it firsthand." Daniel shook his head, searching for the right words. "I never thought any of this would be possible. I was just a guy with a notebook and a lot of ideas but no way to bring them to life. You believed in me when no one else did." "No," Musk replied with a knowing smile. "You believed in yourself. I just gave you the space to show what you were capable of." The two sat on a nearby bench as the celebrations buzzed in the background. Daniel stared at the horizon for a moment before speaking. "You know," he began, his voice soft, "when I was living on the streets, I thought everything was over for me. I lost my family, my home, my dignity, but the worst part was losing hope. That notebook was the only thing that kept me going. Even then, there were days I doubted it meant anything." He turned to Musk, his expression serious. "But the chance you gave me, it wasn't just an opportunity to showcase my inventions. It was a chance to rediscover who I was, to see that there was still something of value in me. I got my son back. I made friends. I found purpose." Musk listened intently, his own expression somber now. "Daniel, stories like yours are rare, but they're the ones that make it all worth it. I don't invest in ideas. I invest in people. And you've proven that, with the right opportunity, anyone can change the world, starting with their own." Daniel took a deep breath, feeling lighter than he had in years. "I'll never be able to thank you enough." "Then don't thank me," Musk replied with a mischievous grin. "Keep doing what you're doing. Keep changing lives. That's the best thanks you could give me." The two shook hands, and Musk stood up. "Now go. This party is for you." Back at the heart of the event, Liam was surrounded by a small group, laughing and chatting. He saw his father and waved him over. Daniel smiled and walked toward him, feeling truly part of something larger than himself. As Daniel reached the group, Liam raised a glass and asked for everyone's attention. "Before we wrap up tonight, I'd like to say something." All eyes turned to him, curious. "This man," Liam began, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder, "isn't just my father. He's proof that life can take incredible turns. I couldn't be prouder." Daniel fought back tears as Liam passed the microphone to him. With a steady voice, Daniel raised his own glass and said, "To second chances. Into the future we'll build together." The toast was met with cheers, laughter, and a palpable sense of unity that few had experienced before. As Daniel gazed up at the starry sky, he felt, for the first time, that his journey was only just beginning. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and check out our next story.